Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back. 10 after 8 o'clock, news and views on Salam Media. And we're now going to be talking with the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, the acronym being SERI, SERI. Let's understand, let me just give you a brief background to what they're all about. They are a non-profit human rights organization. They work with communities, social movements, individuals, and other non-profit organizations in South Africa and beyond to develop and implement strategies to challenge inequality and realize socio-economic rights. A very good morning to you, Nomzamo Zondo. You are the spokesperson, I should imagine, executive director at SERI. So lovely having you online this morning. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Okay, so let's understand. I've given a brief outline of what you're all about. How do you help people? What sort of situations do you look at in trying to assist people legally and otherwise to resolve issues that weigh very, very heavily on themselves and on their communities?
So, Julie, SERI was formed in order to provide the best legal and research expertise to people who are seeking to make the vision of the Constitution a reality. In most cases, we're representing communities and movements who are either threatened with eviction or fighting for the realization of the rights of informal workers, or just generally trying to have a voice in matters that engage their lives. So this morning is the 10th anniversary of the MarikanaMassacre, which is a massacre that happened because over 3,000 mine workers decided that they want to make a demand about how their labor should be valued. And they made a demand to the emperor that they should be paid a living wage of 12,500. Unfortunately, them standing up to communicate, to articulate their demands, resulted in the end the death of 44 people, and 37 of those people were killed by the police. We represent 36 of those 37 of 36 families of those 37 miners that were killed by the police.
So, Nomzamo, the big question for this morning is that obviously it's a tough question. You're talking about 36 of those families. We do know that there are still 10 families who are complaining that they've never been compensated up until today. They were the 10 families victims of, their husbands, brothers, sons, the 10 people that were killed a few days before the actual Marikana massacre. So they seem to have been left out of the loop, unfortunately. They are still awaiting compensation. What's happening, regarding their rights? They've been violated. They've been left out of the cold completely. We've talked with some of these families over time, and what they're saying is that they've seen, certain families have been compensated. Other families have been left out of the loop and totally in the cold. What do you know about that situation?
Sure, Julie. I don't know how much time I have, but firstly, I'd like to explain that it's 7 families that you're probably referring to.
Ah,
Because
okay,
the 10
7.
families that passed away in that week, SERI represents 3 of those families, and those 3
Right.
families have been compensated. But then there are 7 families, which include the families of the 2 security guards. Those families participated in the Commission of Inquiry. They were legally represented during the Commission of Inquiry. It includes the families of 3 non-striking miners. I think those families in the commission at times, their interests were represented by NUM, but also NUM spoke on their behalf. They didn't really have legal representation in the commission. And then there were 2 families of police officers, and those families again were legally represented. From what I know from engagement is that the families of the 2 policemen were compensated because through the occupational injury scheme for the South African Police Service. But then the other 5 families didn't receive any compensation. And again, I want to be clear that the families that did get compensation, it's because they litigated to force the state to compensate them. People might not be aware that in the Commission of Inquiry, the team that represented the Libingwana family, which is another gentleman who was killed by the police, made a recommendation that the Falam Commission must recommend compensation in its report. And the Commission refused to make that recommendation. And in fact, nothing was done in relation to compensation for anyone until the families of the 37 mine workers killed by the police instituted litigation, and the miners that were injured and arrested instituted litigation. And the compensation that has been paid in response to litigation. It's because there are court processes that are forcing the state to pay that compensation. But then for the other 7 families, there hasn't been such a process, and therefore the state hasn't responded to their plight. And in conversations that we've been privy to, we know that those families have engaged the state. These families say they've spoken to Minister Bekele, they've been to Lutuli House, they've been to the Public Protector's Office, they've spoken to Sibanye or Lonman, or Sibanye and Lonman, depending on which time it was, saying, but we also want to be compensated. And if you go and look at the recommendations made by the commission questioned Lonman's push for people to go to work in instances when it was not safe to do so. And if you read the commission's report, the commission suggests that Lonman put the non-striking mine workers in harm's way by insisting that they go to work despite what was happening. And Sibanye now has to answer to that. And I don't know what steps or other steps those families took to be compensated, but the families that we represent join those families in their call for the state to compensate them.
Okay, so Nomzamo,
you have to say yes.
Can you intervene? Is it possible for you to intervene and represent these families, or do you need them to make the approach to you, the 7 families?
So, as lawyers, we already have a group that we represent. Right? If those families, what we can do, which we've already done, right, which we did last week, is we facilitated an engagement between those families and the state. In that engagement, the state was represented by the Solicitor General, and that's the intervention that we have made. Beyond that, what we can do and will continue to do is to amplify the call of our clients that those families must also be compensated.
Okay, 10 years on, we do know that at the time these strikes took place, and of course the massacre, the issues were around better salaries, livable salaries, decent salaries, where the top dogs in the companies are, millionaire or billionaire status. That's the type of salaries they were taking home, middle and top management. And the guys on the ground were literally eking out a living. They were being paid literally almost nothing. So all they were asking is a decent salary and better working conditions. And the result, sadly, was the Marikana massacre. A great lesson to be learned here in South Africa. But let's look at what has changed for those families and families that find themselves in similar circumstances in this present present day, present time. Marikana should have been a lesson to one and all. Has anything changed in the working conditions and the salaries of the people of Marikana?
So, in relation to salaries, I know that it is at least more than 2 years where the miners have a net salary beyond the demand that they had in 2012 for 12,500 rand. I do not know the exact figures because I do not work in that area. But I also know that in relation to the living conditions, unfortunately, the conditions in the Nganeng settlement remain the same. But Sibanye has communicated to many that it intends to upgrade the settlement. But the concerns around access to specific services in settlement, the living conditions in the settlement, I've heard repeated by activists and community members who are living there. In relation to the families that we represent, they have received some compensation, but that compensation only addressed the financial loss that they suffered through the death of their loved ones. It did not address the non-financial loss, which includes the pain, the grief, the trauma that they've been put through and continue to go through, even as we stand 10 years after the massacre. And that's really...
Carry on.
We are hopeful because the office of the Solicitor General has been saying that their intention is to finalize any outstanding claims on Marikana before the end of August 2022, and we are hopeful that will actually happen.
Nomzamo, the one thing that stands out for me is that 10 years on the Marikana massacre, it seems to me that Lonmin or Sibanye are dragging their heels. Surely, knowing that was such a disaster, by now they should have already upgraded, the settlements in and around Marikana, upgraded the people's working conditions. I'm pleased to hear that the salaries have been upgraded, but from what I hear, or what you have just said earlier on, this had only taken place about 2 years ago. Shouldn't people be paid retrospectively regarding the increase in salaries?
So the only thing that I can say, Julie, is that today, at the 10th commemoration of the massacre, AMCU plans to provide more details around the work they've been doing to improve the lives of miners who remain at Sibanye. And I think they will provide the most accurate information around how much the mine workers are earning, what is the minimum salary within Sibanye, what changes have been made in relation to the working conditions. And I'm sure, of course, because in the last 10 years, there's at least been one retrenchment process. There's been multiple threats at retrenchment, and I think they'll also probably respond to that. So I think people should listen out, of course, watch the commemoration, and they can hear those details from there.
And obviously, AMCU is the union that represents the people of Marikana, or the people employed by Sibanye Lonmin. The one burning question which I can't quite get my mind around is, shortly after the massacre and up until today, the people, the victims of the Marikana massacre, when I say victims, the families of the victims, all they're asking for is for Cyril Ramaphosa to meet with them and to just apologize for what has gone down. And up till today, 10 years later, he still hasn't done that. And that is truly a crying shame, is it not? A really sore point with the people. And I think a deep oversight on his part. Can you imagine if he had done that right at the beginning, how he'd be revered? Here the people are begging him to come and engage with them, and all they want is nothing but an apology. The man has still not gone, and he's the man who leads this country. He is our president. He has family meetings all the time, and he says absolutely nothing in those meetings. It's just all soft talk, and yet he can't meet with the families of the victims of Marikana. Your thoughts?
Julie, I think the families, a few years ago, pointed out to the president that if he's serious about apologizing to them, he must approach them and approach their families in an intimate setting and make that apology. They're not interested in apologies made in public galleries. And our office was even instructed to write to him and address him on the issue of the apology and how and what a sincere apology looks like for the families. But unfortunately, we never received a response to that to that correspondence, and there's never been an address to the family saying we want the president wants to come and apologize, name the place and the time. In fact, in litigation that's been brought by the injured and arrested minors, the position taken by the president and by Sibanye is that an apology is not that the minors are not entitled to an apology legally from Sibanye or
Oh
from
no. Oh, how disappointing. How do you feel about that in your personal capacity? I think that is so disappointing. A man of his stature, what is he going to take? What's it going to cost him to make a trip to Marikana and engage with those people from the heart and truly apologize? We're not asking him to take blame, personal responsibility. That's not what we're asking, though that is in fact the issue. But that's not what we're asking. All we're saying is go and meet the people on the ground. They are your people, they are the people of the soil. All you say to them is, I feel your loss, I feel your pain. God be with you all. That's all we're asking. Nomzamo?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we have not had that response, right? And I think the families from even when it was because the request for the apology came some time ago, right? And I think with President Ramaphosa coming in and being someone who was implicated or had a role
Mm.
in the massacre itself, the families would have expected that apology would have come sooner rather than later. But they are still waiting for it. That's all that I can
Oh,
say. They are still waiting for the apology. And in fact, in their litigation, they invited the Minister of Police to apologize. And at some point, I think at the time that it was Minister Mbalula, he
mm.
had agreed to apologize. And then, but then he had been reshuffled, and then the next Minister of Police did not have time for that. But the families are still waiting for someone from government to say government resources were used to cut down your husband. We are sorry, it should not have happened.
Mr. President, you truly have disappointed me that 10 years later, are you too big a man to go down and meet with the people in Marikana? And all you need to say to them is that I feel your pain and I am sorry that this has happened. And may it never, ever happen again. Not anywhere in South Africa. Nomzamo Zondo, thank you indeed. You are the Executive Director at the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, SERI for short. Thank you for your insights on the Marikana massacre 10 years on. God bless and keep up the great work.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It is exactly 8:29, exactly. News and views right here on Salam Media. What are your thoughts about that issue? I mean, can you believe it? The president always talks about when he addresses a family meeting. You know, when I hear that term family meeting, it's like a father or a grandfather saying to his children, saying to his flock, let's get together, let's iron out our situation, let's talk about the things that is causing us pain and how can we circumvent this pain. And yet is the man suggesting that he's way too big. He is too big to go to Marikana. All those people in Marikana want is for him to say, I feel your pain and I'm so sorry this has happened. What is it going to take from him? An hour out of his life? Okay, 2 hours out of his life? Okay, I'll push it even further. A half a day out of his life. No, no, Mr. President, you're losing touch with reality, or you've lost touch with reality, very especially with this issue of the people of Marikana. I have a message here from Soria, I think that's how she pronounces her name, Soria Mamin Azada. Thank you for your comments. You saying so much corruption, period. Justice system fails citizens of South Africa. Marikana case is unresolved. can't agree with you more, but my beef this morning is with Cyril Ramaphosa. I can't believe that this man, whom I've always admired, I've always said he's a man of the people, can't go down to Marikana and just give people, all they wanting is closure. They want you to say, I am sorry this happened. It should never have happened. It is exactly 8:31. News and Views with me, Giuliani, right here on Salam Media. Standing by to talk to us next is Bilal Kathrada. He is the developer and founder of IT Varsity. Well, rather, the award-winning app developer and founder of IT Varsity. I hope I've got that right. We'll ask him to just correct that when he joins us in a minute or two. This is News and Views. Please stand by.